Well, thank you guys so much for um, desiring to come tonight to this presentation. Um, so, my overall research started out of Alabama. And as we research and we start finding and looking for our enslaved ancestors, we find ourselves needing to venture away from Alabama into other states. And once we start venturing into those other states, especially as we start looking at enslavement, there's history that we have to understand. And there's so much to researching that we were having a conversation just before I started about going down a rabbit hole. And these presentations are taking me down a rabbit hole for this new research that I wanted to start doing for myself. So before I begin, I will share that there's areas I didn't want to embark upon. I've been researching now 37 years, and there were areas I didn't want to touch. The colonial period because of enslavement, Native American because I didn't feel I understood it enough. Those were two major areas. There was one other, but those were two major areas I didn't feel I was ready earlier on in my research. Now that I started really delving into the DNA and understanding how to look at that last year, I decided this year to get back to my roots and look at Alabama. And I found all of my enslaved ancestors up to 1870. I found their slaveholders. But now the conversation was Alabama as I start, and if you aren't aware, I research deeds and records and probate records. So my entire research every day, all day is enslavement. I'm not looking for anyone post 1870. I connect with people, but my research is enslavement. And when you're looking through enslavement, you have to look at records. So this year, I decided to look at the records for Macon County, Alabama. And that has put me on this rabbit hole of information and knowledge that I wasn't paying attention to and being familiar with. So that's why I wanted to do this as a four-part series, just kicking off of this whole Alabama piece. So let me get started. Let me share. Okay. So breaking through these brick walls. This my series are always titled Breaking Through These Brick Walls, finding our connection to Native American by researching Georgia and Alabama's history. I am not a historian, but the information that I've gleaned from the books I've purchased, the online information I've been looking at, has really helped me to better understand maybe some pieces that I'm missing, you guys may be missing in researching in this Alabama Native American territory connection. So tonight I'm going to cover Indigenous Americans in North America. U.S. Indian agents, who were they and what were their roles? And I'm only going to hit on some prominent names, but there were so many agents that were identified that are not famous or have not been written about. And so it's so important to understand this period of time and what was going on, because this is why we don't understand how we have DNA matches in Arkansas when I'm only looking in Alabama. Where did they come from? What happened? Then I'm gonna talk about passports. The Indian agents were dealing with passports, the travel that went from one state to another, but they had to cross through the Native American territory, and the importance of paying attention to the knowledge we can glean from those passports. Then there were letters that were written by these famous people, and they were telling the story, telling the history of the people they were connecting with in those areas. And that became really prominent to me because when we're trying to understand our possible connections to them and to the slaves that may have been incorporated in those areas, when you're researching enslavement, you have to know the slaveholders and the enslavers' story, their connections, and all of these are things that help to share that background information that we're missing. Then I'm going to talk about treaties and sessions because this is what was driving that boom and that wave of all the settlers or the people who were migrating from one place to the next. State boundary, me and my typo, state boundary line changes and what was occurring with these line changes. And I'm going to use Alabama as my example because that is what I'm strongly versed in understanding the knowledge of. Census taken before the Native Americans left their native land. Understanding the importance of what information we can glean from the census and the census that were taken. Again, I'm going to use the Alabama census, the 1832 Parsons and Abbott Road census. And then the migration that occurred to Oklahoma, and then resources that we can glean in pertaining to that. So it would be helpful if I didn't have all these typos. My motive, not votive, my motivation. My grandmother, Violetta Van Hoos is my grandmother. And the center is me and grandma, forever a grandma girl. And last year I was able to trip over this particular photo of this woman named Lucretia Wanamaker. And when I looked at the photo, if you ever come to my presentations, you know I was astounded. This woman looks like my grandmother. Who is she? And when I searched my DNA matches for the name Wanamaker, I did in fact have matches. She's out of Orangeburg, South Carolina. Did I have DNA matches in Orangeburg, South Carolina? I did in fact. And that opened up a whole new surname that I'm researching now. But what was so pivotal and intriguing to me today as I lined these photos up, if you look at my grandmother's neck and the goiter that's in her neck, and you look at Lucretia's, they have the same structure in their neck. And I was like, my God, I swore she was a great grandmother, at least a third. Now it's looking like an aunt. But this is something that I'm researching, and these are those gems that encourage us to keep pushing forward. So I'm forever going to highlight her and my love for her, and it's because of her why I give not freely of not just of myself but to others. So the Indigenous Americans, 1600 to 1832. I know there were 5 nations. I'm missing the Seminoles, the Chickasaw, the Muskogee, the Seminoles are here, and the Cherokee Nation. And so I'm gonna be sharing what I've started learning about the Native Americans from these areas. Of course, the focus is going to be Georgia, Alabama, especially as it pertains to the Creeks. Okay, so 1492. This was a photo that I found. As we know, Native America was strictly all about um, the Native Americans that were here. I'm sorry, USA. So this was a country founded with nothing but the Native Americans, and for as early as 1492 and earlier. And Alabama was not a name that was created; it was initially, literally, a Native American identified name for that area. So, of course, many of you know this information that all over was Native Americans. They were always here. And so this is about us just level setting, right? Let's take it a step back before we go forward. And me understanding, okay, this is the information that's telling us North America was always Native Americans. And so, okay, so now we can see visually that they've always been here. Then this was a beautiful map photo that I had found that was depicting the different tribes that were in North America. And then as I zoomed in on them, just beautiful, just astounding of how they were depicting the different tribes that were all over the. This is the southern region, right? And the information that they were sharing about the tribes that were there. But then um, there's a piece, and I quickly added this to the slide that's talking about Native Americans and their enslavement. And I had to add this because without adding this, someone's going to be like, well, the Native Americans were enslaved in America here. So I wanted to make sure I incorporated that just to be able to say yes. The Spanish colonists in 1500s were the first to enslave Native Americans. And then going further down between 1670 1720, South Carolina imported an estimate 24,000 to 50,000 Native Americans as slaves to the Caribbean and other colonies. And as I go further and I start talking about their importance to Alabama, the importance of them to Georgia, and then our connection to the Caribbean islands. And when we start understanding and didacting in this time period in the area, and we just take that piece and focus on that piece, it helps us to get a better understanding of our connections. Because if we go into 23andMe, my heritage maybe, definitely in Jet Match, we start seeing we have Native American connections. But we're trying to, and it goes so far back for many of us, goes so far back. But it's about trying to understand how we're connected, right? And I know that I have European and Jamaican connections on my mother's side, whether it's my mom's mom or my mom's dad. So we're trying to figure that out with a whole lot of confusion. So this is about helping us to be able to say, okay, maybe the Caribbeans is also the Native American and not so much just the Caribbean aspect and African American aspect of the Caribbean areas. But then there was high mortality amongst the Native Americans because of European diseases. Some of us have heard of it. I've heard of it. It went over my head. I wasn't ready to think about it. But now, as I start understanding this Native American piece, so as the Native Americans started dying out because of the diseases that were brought here by the Europeans, they had no one to have to be slaves. And then this is saying that the Native Americans also were escaping because they knew the territory and the land, so they could easily hide out and leave. So they had to find other means for slaves, thus the transatlantic slave trade and the boom that started coming out of that. So we understand and we're focusing on the transatlantic. This is a conversation about the Native American piece and their connection. So the United States Indian agents. This was something totally new to me as I started researching Macon County. So the agents were basically in charge of trying to bridge political connections and ties between the Native Americans that were on land and the U.S. So as the U.S. wanted to try to purchase and acquire land, they had to talk the talk. They had to speak the language of the tribes. So these were the five tribes that this is focusing on. You know, the five tribes that we know of: the Seminoles, the Creeks, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws. That might be who I was missing, and the Cherokees. Okay. So the role of the agents. So the agents, as this is stating, were government representatives. So Indian agents acted as intermediaries between the U.S. and the Native American tribes. So this was during that period of time when they couldn't take over because they had to, so they decided to befriend them. They decided to try to do business with them, learn them. So they identified these agents who were supervisors. And their role was to work with each of the different tribes and to try to help them to assimilate to European American culture, as this is saying down here under 3, encouraging or forcing them to adopt agriculture, promoting Christianity to them. So this was their way of trying to work within them. If you ever saw, my gosh, that movie is going to come to me. I don't know why I don't remember it because I love it. Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu. If you ever watched Shaka Zulu and how they wanted to understand what was happening with him over in Africa, so they took that boat over there. They brought him trinkets. They colored, dyed his hair, brought mirrors, brought jewelry boxes. Same thing was happening. Each time they wanted to try to take over a land, they befriended them. So the agents were in charge of befriending the Native Americans, living amongst them. Law enforcement, they were in charge of policing, not just the Indians and Native Americans, but those who were trying to travel across the lands. So they were facilitating federal control, managing resources and treaties, and then surveillance and reporting. So their job was always to report back to DC what was happening wherever they were. This is talking about criticism and legacy. At the end of the day, we know they were there. We know their goal was to try to take over the territory. So these are some of the prominent agents: John Crowell, George Strother Gaines, John Dabney Terrell Sr., and Benjamin Hawkins. And as you can see, they were born in the late 1700s, Benjamin Hawkins, mid 1700s. And so once I started understanding about these agents, who were they? What were their significant role? So John Crowell, he was an agent to the Creek Agency. Says he was born in North Carolina. He died at Fort Mitchell in 1846. So he was in Alabama working as a Creek agent. He was appointed by the president. Then George Strother Gaines, he was an agent for the Choctaw Nation. And this is seen in the Mississippi Territory, today Alabama and Mississippi. John Dabney, he was in charge of the Chickasaws. Now, of course, as they died or before they died, someone else may have been as identified. But these were, I believe, the gentlemen that were first there. He was over the Chickasaws between 1825 and 1830s when he was working with them, trying to learn the territory and the land and the native, being able to speak their language. And then these are some other Indian agents. This is not all, but this is about helping us to understand, okay, so the U.S. set up these representatives in these territories that were defined amongst the Native Americans. They were the political agents to be able to report back to Washington or D.C. what was happening on the ground. David Bridie Mitchell, he was Creek. John McKee, Choctaw and Cherokee agent, Georgia and Alabama. But my focus tonight is going to be on Benjamin Hawkins because he actually was the agent for Alabama, Georgia to Alabama. And so Benjamin Hawkins was born in North Carolina. He went to Princeton. He was able to travel to France. Hawkins lived as an agent in Flint River, along the Flint River, near present-day Roberta, Georgia. His Indian agency was near Fort Hawkins, modern-day Macon, Georgia. So as we're researching and as I started trying to understand, now all of these landmarks are starting to come out. And I'm like, where is this place? Where's this place? He was in charge of teaching agricultural practice to the Creeks. The timeline for Benjamin Hawkins was, as I was trying to understand, so he married a Creek woman of the Muskogee Nation. So that means his children were part European, part Creek. He named his children Lavinia, John Madison, Muskogee, Cherokee, Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Jeffersonia. So as I'm learning about this man and his prominence, and all of the things that he was able to do, he was very pivotal in this area because Benjamin Hawkins helped to keep peace for the 17 years of his appointment until he died. So peace amongst the Creeks, peace in the area was maintained because of Benjamin Hawkins and his ability to speak their language. And he was able to understand their culture because he married a Creek woman. And this is showing the different areas that he was traveling. Because whereas they may not say he had outside children, and I'm not saying he did, it's important to understand where he traveled. Because at the end of the day, he owned slaves. So wherever they were traveling, they may have been taking their slaves. So one thing you can do is check to see, do you have Hawkins in as matches in your tree? As I speak different names, check to see if you have these names in your tree, especially in these areas. And because what this can help you to understand or discern, maybe you have more connections that you didn't know to look for, right? And so, but he moved to the Creek territory, and that's where he stayed, pretty much. This is a map, a couple of maps that I put together to try to outline the Alabama and the Georgia maps and the Native American locations And this is defining the different fort. So Fort Wilkinson, the Hawkins Creek Agency, where Casita is. These are particular names, especially if you're researching Alabama. We're paying attention to that boundary that's right between Alabama and Georgia. So now I started paying attention to, okay, we know these names, especially in Alabama and Georgia, named after the Creeks, the Native Americans. But for me, it was just going over my head. Okay, it is what it is, whatever. But no, there's importance in understanding these names and importance in understanding our connections to these areas because of these names. This is a map of Benjamin Hawkins' journey from Georgia all the way down to Alabama and where he would travel in speaking with the different tribes. So he didn't just speak with the Creeks. He may have spoken with the Choctaws. He may have spoken with other tribes, especially as they had to have different meetings and the tribal councils came together. So understanding his role and his connection was helping me to understand, okay, this is what was going on in this period of time. Again, America was setting up for us, for America, the politicians, for them to learn the Native Americans. They just couldn't come in and take over. And they had to travel to and fro from one county in the state all the way down to another county into the state. It took days, it took months to be able to go back and forth. This is another map that identifies the upper creeks and the lower creeks. And again, I focus strongly on the Alabama piece and the creeks because that is my connection to Bullitt County, Barber, Macon, Montgomery, Pike County, all of those all of those areas in Alabama. But now I have to broaden and I have to understand who are the upper creeks, who are the lower creeks. And so this is to show you some of the prominent locations where they were. The Creek Agency was right there. So when I'm speaking about Benjamin Hawkins was at the Creek Agency, that's where he was in proximity in the county in the state of Georgia. So he was close to the border of Alabama. Milledgeville. I'm highlighting Milledgeville because there's a lot of writings that talk about Milledgeville, the governor of Milledgeville or the mayor or the governors of Milledgeville and the business dealings that the agents had to deal with the different mayors or governors in these different areas. Milledgeville is a strong connection I have to, I think it's my Prather line, Prather or Prater. They were from Milledgeville. And so now this is helping me to better understand what maybe how I can research this area for my own personal surnames. I think I mentioned Fort Hawkins. So this is a photo that I was able to find about Fort Hawkins and what it may have looked like at that time from 1806 to 1821. So it's so cool to be able to see what the landscape looked like, right? Because it doesn't look like what it is today. Them talking with the different chiefs that are there and just how things were looking at that time. Augusta. This is where Augusta is. There's references definitely of business dealings in Augusta, Georgia. Louisville, Georgia. And so this is just highlighting the prominent locations that has to do with this period of time. The Battle of Horseshoe Bend, I believe that was one of the battles where they did not want to assimilate. They did not want to give in. So there was a battle where the Native Americans fought with Europeans because they were fighting for their land. They didn't want to cede their land. Fort Jackson. So we hear Fort Jackson, we hear Fort Hawkins. What does that mean? Who is it named after? What's its relevance? And so I'm just trying to highlight the importance of paying attention to the lay of the land of where you're researching. And then this is just a summation of all of the areas that Benjamin Hawkins traveled, or that the agents, not just him, the other agents, where they were traveling during this period of time. So now the role of the Creek Agency. So the Creek Agency was run by Benjamin Hawkins, and he had other agents that were his assistants. And this is supposed to be a photo of him speaking amongst the particular tribe that he was speaking with at that time. So, as they acted as intermediaries between the U.S. government and the Creek Nation, it helped certify freedom papers and maintain Creek Nation customs. And so, Benjamin Hawkins, I'm studying him and I'm studying what was happening with these agents because I'm going to be doing a presentation in 2 weeks that's going to talk about what I was able to pull out of a deed, family fighting for their freedom. And Benjamin Hawkins gave them a letter to support that. And I'm like, what was so relevant about her that he gave her and her family letters of freedom for their freedom? So they identified as free people of color. But her mother was Cherokee and she's living amongst the Creeks. So it's so interesting when I hear people say, I've heard people say the Creeks and the Cherokees didn't mix. And it's like, no, you got to go back and you got to pay attention to the history. And so we have to sometimes, so I'm not looking at DNA, I'm looking at records. We cannot try to shape our research solely on DNA. It's not going to happen. And I'm going to show you why over these next couple of weeks. Sometimes you got to put down the DNA and you got to go digging in records. So, Bonanza. Amanda won't know who this is, who this TV show is. But I thought it was so cool to be able to talk about Bonanza. So we know Bonanza was a TV series that was on in the 60s, 50s, and the 60s, ran for a long time. Ben and his children and his boys, but the way they depicted the TV series was so relevant to the time period of our research. And even though this was supposed to be, Bonanza was the Civil War time period, still the way the town looked. And I'm going to show you here, this was a map of Virginia City where the Ponderosa sat. I literally was like, did the Ponderosa ever really exist? But it was so cool to be able to understand the lay of the land. You know, they didn't have cars, they had stagecoaches, they rode horses, horse and buggies. So all of this was going on, especially when you're researching enslavement, same stuff. But one day I was watching Bonanza, and I know there's been a period of times I've seen the Native Americans depicted. I've even seen African Americans depicted here or there, but the Native Americans are always definitely depicted in Bonanza. This particular episode was talking about how this white man was married to the Native American woman there, and how the Cartwrights had to do business with them, and how they had to have relations between the different people that were there. And that's one thing that I think eventually I'm going to talk about is, which I will, I'm going to talk about those relationships that were established in this period of time before we took over their land. Paying attention to those connections is so important, especially as we're trying to figure out who we are in our own research. Passports. So this is one of the reasons why the agents, one of the reasons the agents were identified. If you were traveling from one state to the next and you had to pass through Creek Nation or Choctaw Nation, you had to get a traveling pass. So I was able to trip over this image that showed a representation of the pass. But then in the books that you find, it talks about the passport that's prepared for someone to travel from here to there. The very bottom of this screenshot on the white background screenshot says that passport to be prepared for the following persons to travel through the Creek Nation of Indians, to wit, one for John Moore with his wife, 5 children, and 7 Negroes from Sumter District, South Carolina, and one for Mr. James Perkins with his wife and 1 Negro, which were presented and signed. So we know that many of our African American enslaved family members went from A to B, and we're trying to put our finger on where is that thing that could possibly document them that they were there. So we're looking at census records, especially the slavery periods, and then we're looking at probates and deeds. And these passports can maybe try to glean um, us some information that could help to support and substantiate our family being transported from A to B. I'm related to Moors. in Atauga, Alabama, which then went to Pike County, Alabama, which became Bullitt County, Alabama, and they actually eventually became Stinsons. So all of these things are additional things we should consider to be researching. It's a lot of information. It is a lot. And so sometimes we have to focus on that niche of information and research, but sometimes your brick walls are because you have to expand your research. So some of the different passport information that existed. So I was able to, if I'm a research, I'm gonna get it all. I'm gonna get it all as best as I can because I don't want to miss something. And I want to be able to find my enslaved ancestors and be able to see their name documented somewhere. These are some of the what the passports looked like. Different periods of time, and some are online, some were not, some you had to pay. I was able to find one online. I think I might have found two, but at the end of the day, they're causing us to pay to play. And so this is some of the investment that I'm doing to be able to try to figure out what was going on and can I find my family within information. So this is examples of what those passports and how they documented them in the book look like. It was so interesting to see how they had to be a person of great character because what they didn't want to happen was for you to travel across the Native American territory, and if you stole their horse, you are going to be put to death. If they stole your horse, your things, then you got put to death. The Native Americans got put to death. And so the agents were the ones that were delegating, relegating the laws, trying to keep the peace. And as I'm reading this, the only thing I'm looking for is the word slave, Negro, me personally. But it helped me to start paying attention. The upper right corner says George McFalls is about to set out for the Natchez, as well as to the Louisiana countries on business. I was like, okay, where's the Natchez? Louisiana, Mississippi, and 1804. These are the things that we have to be paying attention to. So when we're trying to figure out how we have connections over there, this is another source to help us be able to glean that information. South Carolina, I have seen Arkansas. I was like, my goodness, they were going somewhere everywhere. This is one that I saw and I read said Moses Keating, a free mulatto man and native of this place, who has been in my service since last August, is about to set out for Natchez with one of my horses and wishes a passport from you to secure him a safe and unintercepted passage. So it's just interesting to be able to see this. I haven't checked to see if I have DNA matches to Keating, but at the end of the day, we're trying to find where our ancestors are documented. Letters written about time periods. So Benjamin Hawkins wrote a lot of letters because he was the representative and he had to write back to Washington what was going on. And there were books, there were online repositories in Georgia, online repositories in different places, and it's so much information. It's so much information, but it helped me to understand what was happening in the period of time. And as I'm reading it, I'm learning about the business dealings and what life was like amongst the Native Americans and the Europeans that are now there in their land. Okay. Thomas Woodward. He was a gentleman that wrote letters. I heard his name, went over my head. Whatever. But no. So now I have to slow down because Thomas Woodward actually was in Alabama. And this here is saying he settled near the area of Tuskegee. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So if you're settling in Tuskegee, maybe you have written about what was going on in Macon and Tuskegee and Pike County. Bullitt didn't exist. So all of these are resources that we have to start paying attention to research, especially for our area of our research, right? So it goes on and on and on. This is a conversation about him and what was happening with some of the people in the area. So let's see. But in all this, he was overruled by the chiefs. Some of their names I will give you. The oldest and principal chief, the one looked upon as the general, was a Tuskegee called Hopi Tustenuga, or far off warrior. He was killed at Fort Mims. The others were Peter McQueen, Jim Boy, or Highhead Jim, Ills Harjo, or probably Haro, or Josiah Francis, and the new made prophet, the Otisi chief, Nihimalamiko, Patty Welch, Hosa Yahola, and Sikabu, the Shawnee prophet, and many others I could name. So now he's saying he was in touch with Shawnees. And there's other names down here at the bottom that I will pull out for you and help you to understand the significance of the names that are highlighted. The last name here is Cornels. Another name here is McGirth on this page, Coulter, McQueen's. And it's like, okay, so we're seeing European names, then we're seeing chiefs. Okay, we're seeing this mixture of names in this time period. I did a search for Cornels. Yeah, I have some Cornels in my tree. They may not be 1800. It may be going further back to Europe. They do go back to Europe, but it's intriguing to be able to see these names and to understand where these connections could be coming from. This is just more of the letters that Woodward wrote about. I loved what he in his writing, because he literally was writing about what was happening in Montgomery, and that's my area of research, right? Where he was physically there, and he talked about the Fitzpatricks, and that is my ancestor's last name, and I've researched the Fitzpatricks to understand they go back to Virginia. This is talking about William Fitzpatrick. This is a deed here in 1841, but you got to know the players, because if you don't know these players, you are completely missing the connection between these names and your enslaved ancestors. So you have to look at the records. William McIntosh, he was a chief that was written about. So that McIntosh last name is a name you got to pay attention to. For me, his daughter, who it says his oldest daughter by a Creek woman, was named Jane. Okay, so we got the McIntosh mixing up with the Creeks. Had a daughter named Jane. There was a reason I'll share in the third episode session why I needed to pull this out, why I needed to research and learn now who are the players with the Native Americans, because I'm now seeing connection to them in trees that I have, and I need to better understand who they were. So treaties and sessions. So I wanted to hit and have a conversation about these treaties and sessions, because this is what was happening. So now they're physically boots on the ground. They're in all of the areas where they're trying to take control over. And these sessions and treaties are when they started being able to take control over the land. So this is just talking about the tribal focus, the government purpose, the household level, and preparing for the removal or the land cession. So these are all of the things. Now that they've gotten the lay of the land, now they want to start having conversations with the chiefs. What do we got to do? What can we do to buy this land? That was their whole conversation, their whole goal for being there, right? But I slipped this in here a few minutes before this meeting, because these sessions actually were the acquiring of the land based on their date, when these were no longer territories, but they now became a part of the United States. And this is what the sessions were. So as they were giving up their land and their territory, because mind you, we know Native Americans were all over the United States, all over North America. So as they ceded their land, America then was able to say Delaware will now become a state, and Pennsylvania will now become a state. And so I didn't pay attention to the sessions, didn't care. Now I have to care. So we can only do so much research at a time. So this is my focus time of understanding the Alabama or the Native American connection with Alabama for me and Georgia. So this is a website that I had found that highlighted all of the sessions. And more than that, Indian traders talks about some of the names of who were actual traders. So the picture of Bonanza and the white man with the Native American woman, a great deal of that is because they were traders. So they had the shops and the stores, and you could come there to buy goods, or they will order goods from Pennsylvania brought to wherever they were. And that had to be travel going through, whether it's on the river or whether it's on land, through the Native American territory, because it was still owned by the Native Americans. And so therefore you had to have peace traveling to and fro. So I was like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot. And so the website was showing how this was the colonial period and the different treaties that were occurring. This is the Chickasaw session in Tennessee and the time periods, dated era of those places. So if you had family that was in Tennessee and your tree can go all the way further back, we got to pay attention to what was happening with the sessions and the Native Americans that was in that area at that time. So the Treaty of 1790, a treaty of peace and friendship made and concluded between the President of the United States, undersigned kings, chiefs, and warriors of the Creek Nations. So this is about the treaty that was for Alabama and the Creek Nations. In 1790, this is what that website had, and I pulled off the particular creek that I was looking for, Georgia. Really, I was looking for the state. So 1790, there's Georgia. And on the maps, you will see numbers. So in the right corner of this map, there's a number 42. So this is sharing that on the Cherokee Treaty of Tellico, number 42 happened right there. So understanding what was going on at the time again, and this is just showing you what the territory, lay of the land looked like, 1800 to 1809. This is Alabama, right? And so in 1800, the lower half was Mississippi Territory. I don't know why that wash is there. Washington, it became Washington from Adams in 1800. And then Pickering, Mississippi in 1800. So if you're researching in the 1800s and you're over here in Alabama, don't be looking for Pike County. You need to be looking in Mississippi Territory or Washington. And those are the things I need to be paying attention to, researching enslavement. Okay. Then these are some more of the seeding of the land. Any of my misspellings? It should just be seeded. Okay. Seeding of the land. And I'm trying to pay attention to what it was at the time. When did they seed the land for America to now be what it is today? And so 1810 to 1819 started looking like this. And then I need to go back to Benjamin. Where were you at, Benjamin? 1800 to 1816, he legally married his wife, because marriages between the Native Americans, Europeans was not legalized, but he legally married her so that his last daughter would be born legitimate and to legitimize his children's births. So he was able to legally marry her before he died. And then, so I track their lives and then what's going on, whether it's a census record, whether it's a deed and probate record, what's going on in their lives until they die. Because I need to, so now the Native American piece is a little bit more meatier than just a probate record and a deed. I need to understand so that I can understand the Native American lives, what was happening for them. I colorized this to show the different sessions that were had, exceeding of the land. So the different numbers coincide with the different time periods that were happening with the seeding of the land. And now the exodus from their native land. What was interesting for me was I thought, don't know why, that every time the Native Americans left, they were kicked out. So, but no, this has taught me, no, somewhere they were able to talk to their chiefs, were able to talk amongst their people, say, let's get this money, and okay, fine, we will leave all this territory we have and go to the Indian territory you've delegated for us over here in Oklahoma. And so it was important for me, at least, to understand what those sessions were talking about, because those sessions were saying they were voluntarily leaving. And again, this is Alabama. And the circle is highlighting Bullock and Macon County, Montgomery, Pike, Barber. So Bullock, because Bullock was carved out of those neighboring areas. That circle is my research. This is where I'm researching. So anywhere you see that circle, that's where I'm researching. What did it look like at the time? 1810 to 1819, land is being ceded. States or counties are now being formed. By 1819, I'm still Creek territory. And so now this is identifying 1804 to 1845, more sessions that were happening. And then this is just showing the whole, again, the federal road, which was what they identified it as. The federal road was where they traveled to and fro from Mississippi territory going all the way back to Georgia. And this is again Milledgeville. So where they were traveling on that road. So, 1820 to 1829. So by 1829, Montgomery becomes formed. Okay, but I'm still looking for Bullock, Pike, Barber, and it wasn't there. It was Montgomery. So in 1829 by 1830, I may be possibly able to see the census for Montgomery. And this is a different map representation of that. And the upper creeks were actually higher than Macon County. Over here on the right hand side, the pink is Upper Creek and the green at the bottom is more of the Lower Creek, but it also extends to Georgia. So it's important to understand the difference between the Upper Creek and the Lower Creek, right? More seceding of the land, but this is identifying voluntary exoduses that occurred. And they occurred up until, so this is showing through 1838, but the ones that I'll talk about is going through 1829. And what I found interesting, I always wanted to understand, how did they move from A to B? They had to leave their native land, but how did they move? What route did they go on, right? So this is helping us to understand some of the routes they went on and how we could have had family that hit Tennessee and went up here into Kentucky and then hit Illinois and then came all the way back down to Oklahoma. Why didn't you go a straight route? I don't know. But these are the things we want to pay attention to if we're researching our Native American and our African American and our possible European connection, right? Because as they're going to and fro, and these are the exodus of the Native Americans, but by then some of them might have had European children that could have been mixed with African children. So this is one route. The first route of a voluntary immigration, 1827 to 1828, occurred, and this is the route that they went in the darkened line is the first route. The place names correspond to stopping points or locations noted in documentation. The second route went in this direction, and then the third route went in this direction. And there was even a route that went from, it appears, Arkansas up to Oklahoma. So these are things that we want to, again, have knowledge of knowing, right? So that we can be better informed about how we want to research and what happened with our folks. So in 1830, as I shared, I'm still looking in Montgomery for any research information. But then by 1839, Macon was created. And this helped me because the online records for Macon County start at about 1839 to 1844. And I'm like, what happened to 1800 to 1820? So many of you know I just came back from a trip to Alabama, driving in my car, my truck. And I purposely went to Macon County because I wanted to see, is there a book I'm missing? But no, Macon didn't have records pre-1839. I would need to go to Montgomery to find those records. And so now my next pass would be to travel or search online. I have tried to search online. I did see a lot of early records from Montgomery, but this helps me to better focus my research based on the time period. Okay. More sessions that are happening, and I'll show you a map that's showing a great deal of that. So now this is a talk about the census. These tribes actually had census that were done. So if you were anywhere, if you have any belief that you might be Choctaw or Cherokee, you want to pay attention to what the census was. And I'm going to show you some things that I gleaned out of the census that was amazing as I paid attention to the Abbott and Parsons roll that was done in Alabama. But this is just a visual of the census that was done, the 1790 to 1840 census Native Americans in the federal census records. For the Parsons and Abbott, this is showing what it looked like. I had a copy of this probably 20, 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Didn't have a clue what I was reading. I was looking for English names, didn't know what to do with it. It just stayed on somewhere on my drive. I didn't know what to do with it. And I knew this was one reason why I said, I don't understand it. I need to walk away. But now someone beautifully put the census online. And even though it was up there, it was up at it. Last update was 2003. So not all of the links are available. But it gave me an opportunity to understand the content of the census. So at the very bottom of the page is this a letter from Parsons and Abbott to Lewis Cass regarding the census. What do we do with multiple wives? What do we do with Indian countrymen? And how do we handle Negroes? So this was their communicating back and forth with the government, with being able to say, how do we handle this? What do we do with that? And as they were preparing this 1832 census. And of course, we know this is before the Trail of Tears happened, 1839. So before they got ready for the exoduses to occur, they kept looking for people to freely leave. That was a voluntary census. But then there were some people who just didn't want to go. And so the census has a great deal of information when you finally could figure out how to research and how to interpret it. Someone transcribed it and put it online, and so this was so cool to be able to see. This is talking about just different letters that they sent back and forth. This particular thing right here is a list of the towns. And where I found it interesting was the towns were named after the chiefs, and the Upper Creek on the left, Lower Creek on the right. So on the creek, on the lower right, we have Eufaula. Many of us know that by name, Eufaula. I've heard High Log. Didn't realize High Log was considered the Lower Creek. Yeah, Macon Bullock, that is Lower Creek. So everything, all of that makes sense. That is Lower Creek that I'm researching, right? So as I'm now using modern day names to understand their interpretation with the census, now it makes sense. And now it's giving it more credence and to me. Then for each town, they broke up males, females, who owned slaves, what was the total, and then this thing called remarks. All of the names were heads of households. Not everyone was identified, just like the 1830, 1840 census. But I'm now paying attention to who has slaves. Because now if you have slaves, the question is, are they Negro slaves or are they probably not necessarily Indian slaves? But it's still important to pay attention. So if I'm researching Native American, I'm going to be looking for who has slaves. And then I'm going to be trying to pay attention to, did you leave and go to Oklahoma? Did by chance you happen to stay? That's how I would be trying to engage this level of the research. Here at the bottom, it's showing for the 1832 census, there was 8,522 people, 457 slaves. So again, if I know that my grandmother said her grandfather was part Creek Indian, I'm all over this. This is one reason why I'm researching this area, because my grandmother and my oldest aunt saw their grandfather and literally said that they were Creek. So I'm trying to figure out through what line, through who. The principal chiefs. So this is showing the principal chiefs, the head chiefs. and the number of slaves they owned. So the chiefs had slaves, then the people living within the tribe, some of them had slaves. This is calling out some of the different towns. So Tuckabacha, I think this town is actually in Macon. I do believe. I believe. Um, but all of this is about now that I can better understand what I'm looking at because now I'm ready to research this in this way. So this is a part of my current research. The Lower Creek, same thing. Eufaula, the Uchi, Oswich, all of this is just information for us to understand, slowly dissect, slowly take our time. And this is a list of the town chiefs. And this is by location. So if you ever know township and range, what's so cool about this? This is telling you where they were residing. So I should be able to look at a map, take this township in this range, and align it on a present day map and be like, this is where you were. Okay. Now I can look at this town. Now I can go back to the list and now I can look for who had slaves, or I can look for people with last names. That's another thing you'll see. And so now I'm able to try to line this up to help me better research what I'm looking for the Native American research and possible connections to African Americans and Europeans. And then on this census, there are people who have last names. The Native Americans didn't have last names. They only had a first name. So if you saw I highlighted that name Cornels earlier, this was why. Because Cornels was a last name that was identified in the census. And so now this is telling me who either married a European and they took that last name. And so now I have a better, strong understanding of how to research these people with the last names. And this is just calling out Upper Creek, Lower Creek, and just, again, the principal chiefs that were there. And what I'm doing here in the third week of research, I'm going to show you that free person of color. She had these chiefs. She had to go before these chiefs and prove she was free. And as I looked at the deed, all of this came about because I read a deed that had her name, free person of color, and all these chiefs' names and white folks' names was listed. And I said, who is she? And why did she have to go before these chiefs? What's going on here? And then I read it said Benjamin Hawkins gave her a letter. And I said, who is Benjamin Hawkins? So all of this information I'm going to be sharing with you over the next 3 to 4 weeks is coming about because of that one deed that I read, which led into a couple other deeds of her children proving they were free out of Macon County. Okay. And this was just another chief that she had to prove she was free. And then this is showing that there were a free Negro. So John McQueen is a free Negro. Where I find interesting with the McQueen last name, I am related to McQueens out of Maryland. This is so interesting to me because my McQueens out of Maryland connect to the Anderson surname out of Maryland. And here, John McQueen was a free Negro who had slaves. No, he didn't have any slaves. In his house was 2 males, 2 females, and he was a free Negro. So it's just interesting. Is this going to help me get where I need to find my connection? Okay. And then this is another list of the heads of households who had last names. McGirth. I have always seen this Peter Anderson, not knowing what it meant to me. I now see it again. But now I'm tracking these Native Americans because they're intermarrying with Europeans. And then I'm looking for these last names in these locations in my DNA match trees so that maybe that can help me to better understand and flush out my Native American connection. And then again, this is the names of the chiefs, as I showed you, with the township and range. And that free person of color I'll talk about in 3 weeks, who they all had to go before. And this is showing where those chiefs were living. So this is kind of like how I would line up my research to these records to see if I'm able to make it make sense for my research. This is just a page of the tribes then versus now. Where are they located now? I think I threw that township and range thing into ChatGPT and say, where is this now? Kind of thing, right? I could have looked by the township and range myself, and we should always do that, especially with ChatGPT, just to be sure. It could have interpreted it differently or wrong. But this is how we're going to try to figure out where was the location then versus where am I looking for it today. And then this is the post 1832 treaty, more treaties that were occurring. And this is the Georgia sessions and the dates that they were occurring. This is the Alabama sessions and the dates that they were occurring. And that red mark is bullet is my area, or 172 was the area of my focus. And just below it is Tuskegee. Just below the bottom of the red circle, it says Tuskegee. And right at the line area, it says Union Springs. That's where Bullitt County is. So that is where my research is. So this just really helps us to level set. And this is a map that's showing Alabama and Georgia. The greens are the areas that are of my research. So Tuskegee, Union Springs, Inverness, Eufaula, Clio, Troy, Elba. The yellow are counties we are familiar with: Birmingham, Montgomery, Opelika, Columbus. In Georgia, Atlanta, Macon, Hawkinsville. And the red circles are the session numbers, the numbers of the sessions that we just looked at. So this is just showing when they ceded that particular territory, what number they were identified. And so all of this helps me to level set with the time period in the research and how to interpret it, right? And then this is just a side-by-side view of both. Okay. So there was a census taken in 1840, 1850, all the way to 1890 of the Native Americans. And this is just showing another example of the 1850. Now, this is a conversation about the Oklahoma identified as the location for the Indian Territory. And this was the path that each of those different sessions occurred and where they traveled. So the yellows are Cherokee. So if we had family members that were North Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, I've not looked to see if I have DNA matches in Missouri. I haven't, but this is interesting to see that maybe I should, right? Because I wanted, do I have Cherokee? We have a lot of grandparents we're trying to find. The orange is Creek. So 5, 6, 7, 8 are Creek. Choctaw is 11 and 12, the red. So these are the paths they took to get to Oklahoma. They did not travel on the same paths. And if you look at 11 and 12, that one went to Mississippi, Jackson, then Vicksburg. But once they went to Vicksburg, they could have gone up to Arkansas, or they could have went down toward Louisiana, come up to Monroe. And the Chickasaws, actually number 10, they left number 10 and went to Monroe. So who is this red? The Choctaw and the Chickasaws eventually traveled in the same path to get to Fort Townsend in Oklahoma. So I know Joan was Louisiana. I know many of you are here. A couple of you are here are Louisiana also. We don't understand it. And this could be one reason why we don't understand it, because maybe we're not looking at it as clearly as we could, because maybe that could be our Native American connection more than it could just be a African American connection we're trying to find and prove. And this is just showing where their location is now, where they're living at in Oklahoma, their tribal jurisdictional areas. the land that was given to them. Out of all the territory that got ceded, this is where they're residing. An amazing thought as I really focused on this now. One reason I didn't pay attention to the Dawes roles. I'm like, who am I looking for? How do I line this up? I don't know what to do. This is helping me at least to feel better about what to do. And this is just showing the 1840 for making it my area of research. And now, my area of research. And this is I'm going to share with you some resources. So for the Choctaw resources, this particular, they have their own. And for me, and it's good to see that this is showing the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, 1830, which led to the Choctaw removal. There was a census taken. But once they got to Oklahoma, do we know how to connect? I have now started researching the Native Americans in Alabama who did, in fact, go to Oklahoma, who Europeans married the Native Americans. And once they got there, they wrote their story. Who are they related to back in the native country? So if we can find that possible connection, we can read that information and have a better understanding. But if you don't understand those names, it's over your head. It's now no longer as much over my head because I'm researching the Native American families and I'm having a better understanding of who they were, just like I would have to do the enslavers. All of this is stuff that we want to slow down and get a better understanding of who are the players in the area at the time. The Choctaws, they have their own website where you can research particular information. So I've gone to a bunch of these websites and I've tried to find maps and resources or information that could be helpful. I also use ChatGPT, just trying to figure out where do I need to look when I'm ready. The first step for me is to understand the lay of the land where my family was enslaved or where my family was from, because it is not just European. We do need to understand the Native American connection to that land and area as well, because we might find enslavement and the connection in there. And next week, I'll talk about that in a minute. But the Cherokee. So all of these are different resources that are available for the different tribes. And whether it's Family Search, whether it's Access Genealogy or NARA, the National Archives, if we can find it now, online resources that are available, always helpful to search for everything you can online before we go that route. The Muskogee Creek Nation, the census roll I showed, but there is a census online that we can see all of the pages. And this is the information about if you believe you're a Muskogee Creek descendant, who to contact. We can't contact them unless we can connect them to our native country. Some of us can connect going forward, but many of us have to figure out what that connection is pre Trail of Tears. And that's one reason I wanted to do this conversation. Tribal names, very important to know. Chattahoochee, how they spelled it, and the common name we now call it Chattanooga. They called it Chattanooga. So it's just important. It's just really important to understand and know the history and of the lay of the land of the area and what we're calling it now. And in fact, it does have history, worthy to be researched. The question is just where are we looking? Okay, I had showed this one already. So this is an additional resource I wanted to be able to show you guys pertaining to Family Search. Family Search, which was so cool. Someone shared this in a group that I was in, and I was able to pull this for tonight. Family Search has this collection or repository, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So in Family Search, if you find the records and you type in Bureau of Indian Affairs, they're going to give you this page. So when I went to the page, I was like, okay, this is everything, right? So over here on the right is what I typed, Bureau of Indian Affairs. It gave me 639 options. But when I went down, where is it? I was able to see Muskogee Creek. So if you're researching another tribe, then open up and expand that option. And this is all the information they have for the Muskogee Creek, so that I could look at records, enrollment of the 5 civilized tribes. So when I said, if we're able to go back and look at what did they say, who did they say, what name we're looking for, once you figured out the name you're looking for, you can possibly go here to read their application and to see who they say they're related to and how. So Family Search does have this particular resource, which is so cool, especially if you know the tribe you're trying to research. And now, my next session next week is Melungeon, European Native American Connection, based on what I've started researching and reading. Then the following week, I'm going to do tracing African Americans, Native Americans to African Americans, and free people of color in this area. And then I want to have a strong conversation with anyone who's willing to hear me about WikiTree, because I'm transcribing a lot of these records so you guys will be able to find it on WikiTree. And all I ask is, if you at a minimum, put your profiles on WikiTree. Unlike Ancestry, we're going to be able to find enslavement. WikiTree is dedicated to transcribing and adding profiles for all of the slaves and enslavement. And when we put our information there, we should be able to try to find our ancestors, because even me, I researched, but I was able to find a connection to my ancestors in Otaga, Alabama. And even though I knew I was there, I was able to truly figure out who my ancestor's father was and where he came from. He actually came from Georgia, and his last name was Foreman, because of the enslaver's father deeded him to his son, who married or who had given the slaves to a Stinson. All of this is important information for us to try to understand so that we can break through the brick walls that we have. And now I shall open up for questions. I thank you guys for your patience. I didn't do too bad. That was only an hour, 149 slides. So let me see what's in the chat. Oh my gosh. So you wrote the Cartwrights. Yes. Had to take it back there. All right, so Amanda wrote, a lot of times if you see your ancestors listed as Black, mulatto, Negro across different census, that's a strong indication that our ancestors were reclassified. And confused, yes. And maybe they felt comfortable finally saying they were mulatto versus being able to say Black. But it's that Native American piece, they never got identified as Native Americans. So were they Black, or were they even listed? So we have so much gaps.
So Deborah, I think you've done and you're doing a fabulous job. You started off saying that you're not a historian. Well, I beg to differ. I think you're quite the historian here. And like you said, you do a good job of showing us why it's important to understand the lay of the land, so to say. So yeah, I think you're doing a fabulous job.
Thank you, thank you. My head was exploding because I said, this is so much information.
Yeah.
How do I do this so that it's not confusing?
Hmm.
And I started this with one PowerPoint, and it split off into 4
Yeah.
when it was really all said and done. But my prayer is, I'm going to encourage you guys, stop looking at DNA, enjoy the land of the records with me.
Hmm.
And by the 4th presentation, I really pray you guys come back, and I'm going to be able to encourage you. Help me, help you, help us, help us, because Wiki is doing some amazing things, and I'm going to be able
Hmm.
to show, at least for this Alabama corner where I'm researching. But it's happening everywhere. But at least I'm researching records because I know it's important for us to find ourselves there,
Hmm.
so we can so we can understand the connections to the DNA.
Yep. Well, that was great. Like I said, you're doing a great job. I love it. Uh, yeah, I need to be in them records just like that.
Absolutely. Listen, by that 3rd one, the Melungeon is. I know a lot of people are excited about what am I about to say about the Melungeons. It's gonna be my prayer. I'm gonna be like, this is what I'm gonna tell you, because it's almost like contrary to what I feel like they're trying to overwhelm us
Hmm.
with the knowledge, so we don't engage it to figure out where we are.
Right.
You know, when you make it feel like it's so huge and it's so sad and
Mm.
it's so much, it is what they say, bite the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just what I can't. I'm so mad with Annette. Annette, you finally came at the end. This is my Macon County chick. And she came at the end, Annette. Oh, Annette. She's going to have to
He
watch
said,
the video.
it's the end, but I made
She
it.
did. She did. She's going to have to watch it. And then she's going to have to talk to me about it. But Annette, this was for you and me. We're both researching Macon and Bullock and all that is over there. But it's all good. All right. Any other questions or feedback? See,
Just thank you. Great job.
that's why I say hold your questions at the end, because sometimes people are like, but what about? But what about? And my
Uh,
prayer is, I'm gonna give it to you where I'm gonna answer all your questions.
Hilbert,
yeah,
Yeah.
you covered it. You covered pretty much everything. So
this
yeah,
is
I don't have
Candace.
any questions. It was a great presentation.
Yes, cousin Kansas. Thank you.
I, I looked in my tree before the session started, and I had a Benjamin Hawkins from
Mm,
1815 that
yes.
I'm going to see if there's some type of connection.
So was he in Alabama or Georgia?
Let's see. I've
That's
got him.
fine.
Okay, what I have is 18 Benjamin Hawkins, 1815. How do you pronounce it? Coweta Town Creek Nation East,
Yes.
Carroll, Carroll
Yes.
County.
Yes, girl. Listen.
Died,
Wow.
died in how do you pronounce this? Natchitoches, Texas.
Wow. Nice.
Yes. He went to Texas.
And I'm thinking as you were speaking, I was thinking maybe he might have been a spinoff from one of those children that that guy from 1754 may have had, but um
What's weird about him, I'll tell you about him. What's weird about him was I'm researching right and I got the agent, Benjamin, died 1816. Who is this other Benjamin? Who is he? What's going on? I went off on a rabbit hole. Now I got to figure out who this Benjamin is because he's a whole different person than this other Benjamin. I believe he's a nephew.
okay,
And
so
that,
you have him also, or you ran across him as well?
yes, ma'am, I researched him.
Oh,
And trust me when I tell you, when you go into Wiki Girl, I got y'all because I'm breaking down Alabama and all this madness. So it's clear for us. You guys are going to be more excited about Wiki than Ancestry. I promise you. I promise you. But yes, I know who that Benjamin is. And he picked up after the Benjamin died.
okay.
And he was actually a part of this free person of color family, I think in representation. I'm like, no, he was dead. Who is this guy? And so I ended up having to research him. And so, yes. So I'm going to show you this because I need y'all to get excited about coming to my presentations. I wasn't going to show it to you, but it was the last thing on the list. So as I'm researching, just like you guys, right? I said, let me search for Hawkins. What in the world? This is another thing that took me on the rabbit hole of Native Americans because this is a DNA connection I have on my maternal side. Of course, that could be my grandmother's side that I know almost like the back of my hand, but it could be my mother's side. That's the Fitzpatrick line. But in her tree, she has William Hawkins and Cindy. But Cindy's enslaver was a Jane McIntosh. That McIntosh name married into the Native American line. And what the yellow information in the picture says, slave of Jane Hawkins. So I went on a different rabbit hole trying to figure out who was Jane Hawkins. So Jane was a McIntosh that married a Hawkins. And so now I'm building profiles for these Native Americans so that I can understand their connections to each other so that I can didact. And this cousin, she had the Oklahoma paperwork connected. So as I was able to look at the Oklahoma paperwork, I could see the story of who they said was their parents and grandparents from the native country. And I said, oh my God. And through Wiki, I'm creating profiles for all these people so that we can try to pull and find any enslavement, any connections to these lines. So I'm telling you, I need you guys to get your profiles in Wiki if you do nothing else, because I want y'all to get excited about getting in Wiki.
So I don't want to get ahead of your schedule, but do you have a date for your next session?
I'm doing them all on Wednesdays. So the free person of color talk I'm going to have is on the 17th. And next week,
Okay.
I'm doing the Melungeon conversation.
All right. I'll look forward to the invitation. Thank you.
And all of the dates, it's going to ship. I think it's the same link, but the links are all on the Facebook page and everything. So thank you guys. I'm not going to keep you. What I get excited about is doing a PowerPoint in an hour and a half max and give you your life back. So I'm grateful that you were able to glean some stuff out of what I'm sharing. And then as we go along, these names will start making more sense, especially, see, you didn't realize to look for that Hawkins name. And you're Alabama, I know, because you're tied over there with me and Georgia. And Georgia.
Right.
Cedar Lane out of Georgia. And the Hawkins family was heavy in North Carolina and Georgia. So their profiles are on Wiki, and you'll see my name. I've been hitting them hard. But
Okay.
I will share with you if you had any consideration about putting your stuff in Wiki tree.
I'm on Wiki, yep, I was hitting my profile hard for a while, but yeah, I'm on there.
But what I'm hitting is the enslavement information.
Hmm.
And because I researched the entire deeds and probates of Pike, I was leery about putting my stuff in Wiki, but someone transcribed the entire county of Autauga, and that's how I was able to find my ancestors' information and his connection to
Nice.
Georgia.
On
So,
WikiTree.
yes, on WikiTree. And
Okay.
because that man did that, he inspired me to put my stuff here. And so now I'm putting everything I have into WikiTree.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So I'm on the Native American team. I'm on the Alabama team. I'm on the Black Heritage team. So, but yeah, put your profiles in WikiTree, because I
Yep.
promise you, that's where we're gonna find our connections fooling with me. So,
Yep. Good deal.
Annette came in and she left, but I'll reach out to her, and she'll probably watch the video. So, thank you guys so
Yep.
much for coming.
Yep.
Put
Thank you,
comments,
Dal, bro.
put comments in the Facebook page so they can realize. Go watch the video. They missed out on something.
That's right. I
All right.
got you.
Thank you,
Thank
cousin.
you. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
I'll catch you
You
later.
too now. All
All
right now.
right.
Bye bye.
Bye.